RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, opinions, or statements of its guests or advertisers. The information contained in this program is not to be construed as medical or legal advice. An appearance on the show is not to be considered an endorsement, and as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pill News for Saturday Night Livestream. Joining me in the studio tonight is none other than Dr. Michael Salla, founder of exopolitics.org, researcher, author, and brilliant mind. Tonight we are going to be talking about the mysteries of Antarctica, a widely anticipated program. You guys have been clamoring for an Antarctica show for a long time, and I am pleased to be able to bring it to you. Please do me a favor, guys. Don't forget to like and share this broadcast. Share it on your favorite social media platform. Send it to your friends and loved ones. Email it. Help us break through the algorithm. Very excited about this one myself. All right, gang. Please, everyone, do sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. The CV-19 crisis is causing aftershocks all throughout the world economy. Everything is at risk now, especially the food supply. Yes, the government can print bailout money, but they can't print food. Food takes time and the production follows a tight schedule. But CV-19 interfered with that schedule. And now there are gaps in the supply chain that will soon show up as food shortages at your local grocery store. Are you prepared? What if you can't buy any food for a couple of weeks? Well, don't panic. Just go to preparewithredpill78.com right now, and you can save $100 off a 4-week food supply of delicious, nutritious food from My Patriot Supply. They're the top-rated company I personally use and trust for my emergency food. You'll breathe easy when you receive your 4-week kit. It gives you enough meals to get you through the coming food shortage nightmare, and the food tastes like home cooking too. So don't delay. Go to preparewithredpill78.com right now. Get your order today. Tomorrow might be too late. Once again, that's preparewithredpill78.com. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, everyone, thanks for sticking around. I do appreciate it, and please join me in welcoming my guest for this evening, Dr. Michael Salla. Michael, how are you?
I'm good, Zach. How you doing?
Excellent, excellent. I am so excited to have you here. Like I said, Antarctica is a subject that just fascinates everybody. But for people who may not be aware of who you are, I mentioned that you're an author, you're a researcher, obviously you're a doctor, don't know of what, but please tell the audience who exactly you are.
Sure. Well, I have a doctorate in government, which is basically political science, and I taught at various universities in Australia and in the United States in the field of international politics. And around 2001, I got attracted into this really esoteric field of UFO cover-up, anomalous phenomena. And so that's when I went down that rabbit hole in 2001 and basically left behind a conventional career and everything that went with that conventional career. And it was it was quite a big change going from being an assistant professor, looking for tenure at a major university, to like basically being an independent researcher trying to make a living from selling books and writing research articles on the internet. But now I am seeing that a lot of people are doing that, so I don't feel so foolish when I did that.
Well, you're amongst good company in this field here. So how many books have you written, Dr. Salla?
I've written 13. I've written 11 books, but altogether I have 13 because I've edited. I was the co-editor of 2 books, so 13 books altogether.
Okay, beautiful. And I said you're the founder of exopolitics.org. Tell us about exopolitics.
Well, exopolitics is basically looking at all of the implications of evidence concerning extraterrestrial life. So the way I define it is examining the political actors, forces, and institutions concerning extraterrestrial life and technology.
Okay, so you're looking at the real world, implications and possibilities and actions of people, not just speculating on what many people think is probably the case.
Well, yeah, for me, as a political scientist, as someone that actually did teach international politics, to me, the extraterrestrial factor is just another layer of politics. Just as you can focus on domestic politics and totally ignore international politics.
Mm-hmm.
But to do so means that you're missing a lot of factors that influence domestic politics. So I do the same thing, but I'm saying that, well, if we look at international politics but ignore exopolitics, then we're missing what's really going on. So what I do is to try and produce as much evidence, like credible research data as I can, to kind of like lay out what's going on in this world of exopolitics and how that influences our understanding of the international arena.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Well, I'm sure that will continue to come up further tonight. And then also next week, I want to just let everybody know who's here right now. Dr. Salla is going to be joining us for a part 2 of this interview next week, because tonight we're going to be talking specifically about Antarctica, which is truly shrouded in mystery. I mean, people are not allowed to just go visit Antarctica. I believe that you have to have a specific purpose and the privilege from the government to be able to go there. But is it through your investigation into the idea of exopolitics that you began to get information about Antarctica, or was that already a subject of interest for you?
Well, that was something that I really got interested in kind of when I got involved in this exopolitics field. There were all of these rumors about the Germans establishing a breakaway colony in Antarctica during the Second World War. So when I began doing this research in 2001, it was a pretty wild theory, but like anything, it was like, okay, I just looked at it, and when I wrote my first book on exopolitics, I included some of the information I had in there about this German colony that was established in Antarctica. And since then, I've just found a lot more evidence, a lot more credible people have come forward saying that this really did happen, that the Germans did establish a colony in Antarctica during the war, and that the Americans and the British were basically trying to find it. And one of the things that I found very interesting was that in 1939, before World War II even began, Admiral Richard Byrd received orders from President Roosevelt to head up a task force of 3 Navy ships to go down to Antarctica to find the German colonies to find the German bases down there, to see if they were violating the Monroe Doctrine, to see if the bases had been established in West Antarctica as opposed to East Antarctica. But the Germans were pretty smart. And they established the bases in Queen Maud Land, which is technically part of East Antarctica. So basically, there wasn't anything that the Americans could do. But nevertheless, there's these articles that you find, these historic articles in the New York Times and other mainstream journals describing the equipment that Admiral Byrd took with him down to Antarctica in 1939 to find the German bases. So when people say, well, there's no evidence of German bases in Antarctica, you can kind of just refer to those articles from 1939 saying, well, then if there's no evidence, why did President Roosevelt send Admiral Byrd with a flotilla, a small task force down there to find the German bases to see if they were violating the Monroe Doctrine? So, I mean, quite clearly the American intelligence was that the Germans did establish colonies. And then later on, I found more data. There was this former Navy covert operative by the name of William Tompkins, and he headed up, or he didn't head it up, but he was a key part of a covert espionage program that was established out of Naval Air Station in San Diego, and out of that station, they were running a espionage program in Germany where there were these Navy spies embedded within major German aerospace companies, trying to find out, what the Germans were doing, and they were getting reports about the Germans actually building out these bases in Antarctica using all of this advanced aerospace technology that they were pioneering in Germany, and basically it was that the German colony in Antarctica was being run by the Navy, and that that was actually separating itself from the Nazi party and the Nazi war effort in Europe. So that seemed to be a breakaway group of German nationalists that used the resources of Nazi Germany to sponsor their building these bases in Antarctica, promising all kinds of wonder weapons for Hitler, but at the end they refused to hand them over. And so, that kind of explains some puzzling kind of comments during the war about these wonder weapons that never turned up.
So when Admiral Byrd went down there to check it out at the behest of the president in 1939, was that Operation High Jump, or was Operation High Jump after World War II?
After World War II, that's right. So this was a precursor to Operation High Jump. And interestingly, I actually have Operation High Jump happened during the Antarctic summer of 1946, 1947. So that's from December to February. But the previous year, basically the intelligence information that I've got from two sources was that Admiral Byrd traveled down to Antarctica because he was so highly respected by the Germans that he actually went to Germany for the 1938 launch of the Schwabenland expedition. So he was the guest of honor because he was such a famous Antarctic explorer, and the Germans kind of basically esteemed him greatly. So after the war, you have this German breakaway colony in Antarctica. So Byrd was sent there with basically orders to try and set up some kind of negotiated deal with the Germans to get them to surrender to the Allies. So this happened in the summer of 1945-46 in Antarctica. And so Byrd was flown there. He met up with the Germans, and basically they told him no deal. We're not surrendering. We're fine and we're comfortable here. If your government wants to take us on, we're ready. So it took them a year. So the following Antarctic summer, Operation High Jump went down there. This time, Admiral Byrd was leading the expedition, and this is where you have all of the stories about Operation High Jump, suffering casualties, and that there was a war in the kind of South Atlantic, and that some ships were destroyed, a lot of planes were destroyed, and personnel were lost.
Well, and this is, a mythical story at this point. I mean, we know with certainty that Operation High Jump was a legitimate thing, okay? We've got film of Admiral Byrd talking about preparing to lead this expedition. I believe there is even footage of all of the ships, as they're leaving. Have you ever been able to track down any first-hand accounts or even second-hand accounts of people that went to Antarctica on that expedition, and maybe some data on who actually did make it back?
Sure. There is actually two sources that we know of that traveled down to Antarctica. No one knew about these sources. They were part of Operation High Jump. Two Navy sources, and we learned about them after the end of the Cold War with the collapse of the Warsaw Pact. So basically what happened was that the KGB collapsed, and a lot of the spies were out of a job. So what they did was they began selling intelligence files to the highest bidder. And so some of these files basically concerned data about Operation High Jump. And so there were two sources, American sailors that were part of Operation High Jump that reported the encounter. So they gave first-hand accounts of flying saucers coming out of the ocean and attacking the expedition. And they also described the aircraft that were part of. It was I believe it was the Philippine Sea that was the aircraft carrier that was basically at the head of the high jump, and that those aircraft were shot down by these flying saucers that had these kind of laser weapons.
Oh, wow.
So the Navy didn't have anything to kind of like counter that. So this was in January 1947, where you have this. So this was the first time that we've actually had two eyewitnesses actually their testimonies coming out. Of course, it came out after the Cold War through the KGB releasing these files, and so there's an actual documentary which describes these KGB files and describes these different accounts. I describe them in my book. I do have a book called Antarctica's Hidden History. So I describe the account by those servicemen and give the details, like references for where people can find it. So you have those two people whose reports were part of this KGB data set. Then you have Admiral Byrd's own eyewitness account when he went to Chile. It was, I think it was around early March 1947. He gave an interview to a journalist, Lee Van Atta, who was based out of Chile, and he was working, I believe, for Associated Press. And he wrote an article for a Chilean newspaper that was called El Mercurio, and he described what Admiral Byrd had told him, that they had suffered casualties, that there was a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole, and that America was facing a brand new threat. So all of that was very suggestive that Operation High Jump did run into a very powerful force down there, and that they basically suffered a very bloody nose. After that, I got more kind of intel from different insiders, basically describing that the Germans, they wanted to give the Admiral Byrd and the task force a bloody nose. They didn't want to obliterate it because their goal was to they didn't want to go to war against America. The bottom line was that the Germans in Antarctica were smart enough to realize that a war against America was not a good idea. Even if you had a technological edge, that was no guarantee. So what they wanted to do was to basically come up with a deal, negotiate with the Americans using their advanced tech, saying that, look, we have this advanced tech. We've been working for well over a decade now in understanding advanced extraterrestrial technologies. And we've made tremendous breakthroughs. And we've made breakthroughs in the propulsion, the navigation, the weapons, avionics, metals, everything that you need to understand in terms of developing flying saucer craft. The Germans had done this because they had begun working on this in the 1920s,
right?
Early 1920s. So by the 1940s, the Germans had already, over 20 years' experience trying to understand and reverse engineer extraterrestrial technologies. So the Truman and the Eisenhower administrations began the process, and under Eisenhower, the deals were struck. And that's when you actually had deals where in exchange for this advanced technology that the Germans understood, and they would kind of like help the Americans develop breakthroughs, and they would supply that through the Operation Paperclip German scientists, because a lot of those German scientists through Operation Paperclips were double agents.
Yes, yes. Michael, Doctor, just one second. I need to give a couple of quick thank yous to the audience, and I want you to continue with that thought. Looney Tune wants to know your thoughts on the alien face in Antarctica on Google Maps. We can talk about that when it comes time. Tracy K and Leanda Gooding have joined as members. Thank you. Jared in Seattle says, John D'Souza, now Dr. Salla, you just made my weekend more palatable, RP. I saw Dr. Salla speak at Contact in the Desert last year. Look into his work, people. He is one of the best. Red Pill Doc says Dr. Salla's book was found putting, oh yeah, your books were one of the many that when you search for the trip code from Q in Google, it came up. Yeah, that's right. Then Dr. J999, he was supposed to see Dr. Salla at Contact in the Desert this weekend, but CV19 had other ideas. This works just as well. Awesome. Well, I'm glad that worked out for you. All right, so through Operation Paperclip, this technology began to be integrated with the Americans' technology. Did the base, did New Schwabenland as a base survive down there, or did that get taken over by the U.S. as well?
It did survive. Basically, what happened was that the Germans, they were very clever. They had the German corporations, multinational corporations, basically build the craft for them in New Schwabenland. And in collaboration with these German multinationals, you had American multinationals coming on board. And basically, it was a kind of integration of these German and European multinational corporations under the leadership of the breakaway German colony down in Antarctica, working with American corporations to build out these enormous facilities in Antarctica, which would eventually be handed over to this transnational corporation that had been set up. That basically, on the board of directors of that transnational corporation, you had, the leaders of German, American and European corporations collaborating, but that they would basically provide a lot of the hardware for the breakaway German colony, which kind of sounds amazing now, but they moved out of Antarctica in the 50s and the 60s and established colonies on Mars.
Really?
Which is amazing when you think of it, but it kind of makes a lot of sense, because when you look at the Apollo program, that began early 60s, and it was headed up by German paperclip scientists. Werner von Braun was in charge of the Marshall Space Flight Center, which was basically the brains for the Apollo program. And then you had Kurt de Bus heading up the Kennedy Space Center, which was the launch facility for the Apollo program. So how could it be? How could these German scientists be heading up these premier Apollo bases that were running the entire Apollo program? What was happening was that the Apollo program was a cover. It was a cover for, sure, you had a lot of resources coming in to build the Saturn V rockets and the landers for the Apollo program that everyone saw, but a lot of that money was also siphoned off. There was actually a lot more money siphoned off to Antarctica, where the Germans were building fleets of spacecraft that were going off to Mars. And so in one of my books, I basically say, while the Apollo program got man to the moon, it got the Germans to Mars and Alpha Centauri. So, which is really incredible. But this is what happened. The Apollo program was a cover for this massive amount of money to be siphoned off to the German colony in Antarctica, so it could build out bases on the Mars, so that it could then relocate and hand over the bases in Antarctica to this transnational corporation comprising German, American, and European multinationals.
So the presence that we have down there right now, I mean, you've got multiple territories and bases that are owned by different countries, and it's supposed to be a neutral landmass, if I'm not mistaken. But that original New Schwabenland base, is that now occupied by the U.S. government, or would that be people associated with this secret space program?
Right. Well, with the original base in New Schwabenland, I mean, that has been handed over to this transnational corporation. And, there were several bases that were built, large bases that were built for this German space program out of Antarctica. But when the Germans handed it over to this transnational corporation, basically that transnational corporation began building craft.
Oh, this is. I guess I was confused. I mean, I thought that this transnational corporation, it was, like a conglomerate of different countries. But you're saying this is, external ownership to any specific nationality?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's basically what we're talking about is a rogue transnational corporation that doesn't answer to any government at all, that works, that basically builds these enormous craft for the German space program on Mars, as well as their own program. So what we're talking about here is enormous bases being built deep under the ice in Antarctica, working on these really elaborate engineering programs to build very large spacecraft that could then be used either by the Germans or by this transnational corporation.
Okay.
And in the meantime, you have the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force trying to keep track of this and build their own programs in the U.S. mainland, but basically trying to kind of get as much intel as they could, and that's been kind of like the game ever since the German and the American administration basically began to collaborate. It was all about trying to get as much intel on what the other was doing, and trying to, especially for the American, for the Air Force and for the Navy, bring that intel back to their top secret facilities, whether it's at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for the Air Force, or whether it's at the China Lake for the Navy, and kind of like try and reproduce and reverse engineer whatever it was that the Germans were doing down there. So that's been going on for decades now. But right now, what you have in Antarctica is an international space program, which basically works alongside this multinational, transnational corporate space program. And this multinational space program down in Antarctica, that's where you actually have those member nations that are part of the Antarctic Treaty. The major nations, we're talking countries like the US, China, Russia, Britain, Canada, so forth, Australia, that all of these are collaborating, and they are part of a secret space program, which is an international space program headquartered out of Antarctica. So that also uses these facilities that had been built by the Germans. So in a sense, that very first space program that was established by the Germans, that was relocated off to Mars, and then the bases were re-equipped or repurposed, so that now you had a transnational corporation using a majority of those bases, but also at least one of those bases was handed off to a consortium of international nation states, who basically put together an international space program where they would use some of the craft that was built by this transnational corporation to be able to travel into deep space, other solar systems, to be able to do the kind of colonization, the exploration that they feel is important for their program.
Okay, so multiple competing interests and loyalties at play here. I mean, it's not like, we've just got, the entire world is down there collaborating on stuff. I mean, it's people from all different countries, people from different companies. The original secret space program that broke off in the beginning with the Germans. That's pretty fascinating. Michael, what about the stories that I've heard of older, ancient bases that are down in Antarctica. I mean, I've heard some accounts. I'm sure you're familiar with Linda Moulton Howe. She's done plenty of work on Antarctica. She's had people that are apparently whistleblowers letting her know that there have been these incredible finds down there. What do you know about ancient things taking place down in Antarctica?
Right. Well, this takes us to the whole question of like, how long has the ice sheets been covering Antarctica? Now, I know Linda says that they've been covering Antarctica for several million years, which is the kind of conventional scientific opinion. But when you look at some of the ice core data, what it shows is that the ice core samples in East Antarctica are like several million years old. Mm-hmm. But the ice core samples in West Antarctica, especially up around the Palmer Peninsula, are much more recent. They're only a couple of thousand years old. So what's the discrepancy? Why is that? Well, how you can explain that is the idea of a pole shift. Mm-hmm. That Antarctica's current location, where the South Pole is, where it presently is smack bang in the center of the Antarctic continent, the South Pole, we're talking about the physical South Pole, has not always been in the center of Antarctica. Mm-hmm. Now, according to the research that I've done, and there's a really good book that I recommend. It's by Rand Flemath and his wife that basically describe Atlantis under the ice. And what this basically says is that the western region of Antarctica, up and especially Queen Maud Land, the Palmer Peninsula, all of that was ice-free up until around 11,600 years ago. Okay, which equates to the sinking of Atlantis, according to Plato. And so, according to Flemath, they look at the geological records, and they've basically said you can track a number of pole shifts that involve 40-degree shifts of the geophysical pole or less over the course of the last 100,000 years. And in all of these, since around 97,000 BC, the Palmer Peninsula has been ice-free, but the eastern portion of Antarctica it has been under ice, or it's been in the Arctic region or the Antarctic region. So that would explain why the ice sheets in East Antarctica are ancient and the ice sheets in West Antarctica are fairly recent, especially up around the Palmer Peninsula. So this then basically takes us to the idea of exactly what's under the ice sheet. And so is Atlantis buried under Antarctica? And I think there's good reason to suspect that what Plato described, this the Atlantis being in the center of a great ocean, he was describing Antarctica from the perspective of its location right in the midst of this great ocean. Because around Antarctica, there is no kind of like division. It's like it's one great ocean all around Antarctica, which we in terms of our geographic locations, we say, well, the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean. But from the perspective of Antarctica, that's all one great ocean. There's no separation there. Yeah. So this is consistent with what Plato described. So I think I agree with what the Flemaths wrote in their book, that Atlantis is actually buried under Antarctica, and the reports that we're getting coming out of these ancient cities under the Antarctic ice sheets are basically the ruins from Antarctica. Okay. So, Atlantis.
What do you know about the Rakat structure in Mauritania? Are you familiar with that location at all?
You'll have to remind me about
the Rakat structure. It's a large desert in Mauritania in Africa, and it has So one of the features of Atlantis is that there were concentric rings, which had canals and waterways in between them, and each of these sections of Atlantis would have different people and different things on each of those places. And then it's surrounded by mountains. It has some geographic features which line up with Plato's account of Atlantis, and but what I've always thought is that if the world and civilization is older than we know, and there have been pole shifts and great destruction as a result, it's very possible that whatever the civilization was that existed in Atlantis, I mean, they could have had, they could have been like Rome. They could have had many different people across many different places in the world. And if there was the type of destruction that would result in, one island being, sunk under, a whole bunch of ice, and then another one just being made completely into a desert, it's just an idea that I had, that perhaps the Atlantean civilization might have existed across a larger portion of the earth.
Exactly. I think Atlantis was an empire. And I mean, that's exactly what Plato described. It was an empire, and it was basically launching this war of aggression against ancient Greece, and that the Greeks beat the Atlanteans off. But the Atlanteans were very imperialistic, and they had all this advanced technology. So yeah, no doubt they had many colonies all over the world, which is consistent with the kind of information I got, that there was a significant extraterrestrial kind of factor in the rise of Atlantis. That they had some really advanced extraterrestrial technologies that they used, but of course all of that was hidden as a result of the Great Flood. But I think when you look at what Plato described and what we know from the geological records, because Plato wrote about what he discovered, Plato, the information he got dated from around 600 BC. That's when Solon went to Egypt and got this information about the sinking of Atlantis. But the Greeks were told that it happened 9,000 years earlier, which for them was 9,600 BC, which we know basically corresponds exactly with the end of the Younger Dryas, which is the end of the last ice age. So, what are the chances of that? That it's like the geological record matches exactly what Plato wrote about. So I think the sinking of Atlantis was basically a result of a pole shift, where you had Atlantis being moved from a location in terms of latitude. That much of Atlantis was probably around the same latitude of, say, modern-day New Zealand. And it was moved south to the present location where the South Pole was now, right in the middle of it, right in the middle of the Antarctic continent, whereas previously it was to the south of the continent. So I think it all kind of lines up really well, and that under the ice sheets, people have found, governments have found the remnants of not just Atlantis, but other ancient civilizations, and also extraterrestrial bases down there. We can talk about inner Earth civilizations as well.
I would love to. Let me just do a couple more quick thank yous. Tire Queen says, "Hey RP, you always make my day brighter. Fantastic surprise tonight. Hello friends." Thank you, Tire Queen. Gerald Jean, thank you for that. And Jared in Seattle says, "Linda Moulton Howe participated in the Rockefeller Initiative in the mid-90s. Proceed with caution when researching her work. There are plenty of agents in the UFO community." I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I just brought her up purely as an example because that was how I wanted to get to that point, guys. So don't hold it against me. Okay, so yes, getting back to what you had just said, that is a fascinating idea, to think that there could be bases built by other extraterrestrial beings. Please, what do you know about that?
Okay, well, one of the most mysterious incidents, and this is basically, you can see this in the official government archives, where there's a video showing Admiral Byrd going on a mapping expedition into the center of Antarctica, flying over the South Pole. And that's where you have, he disappeared. For several hours, he disappeared, and they really thought they'd lost him, that the plane had run out of fuel and that he had crashed. but then he came back. So, this has been documented that Admiral Byrd did get lost on a surveying mission over the center of Antarctica, flying over the South Pole. Now, this is where we get to the stories about Admiral Byrd's diary. I mean,
Yes.
really controversial. But basically, someone called Harley Byrd, who claims to be the Admiral's, nephew, said that this was the actual diary from Admiral Byrd. Now, I don't know whether the diaries are 100% accurate or whether they are kind of like based on his recollections. But I think there's truth there, because that's often the way in which the intelligence community operates, is that they will release something to be copied by someone else and embellished a little bit, and then that embellishment will be released. So you get the information out, but it can be easily discredited because of the embellishments. So anyway, with that caveat, Admiral Byrd's diary describes him going into the center of the Earth, and he actually did some interviews too, where he talked about the land beyond the poles. Mm-hmm. So he did do some interviews saying that he had gone into this land beyond the poles, and it was vast, as big as America, he was saying. And I believe what he was describing was he had been allowed to travel through the portal into the inner Earth through the South Pole, and he was able to meet with a group of inner Earth beings called the Ariani. Very tall, kind of Nordic, Northern European-looking peoples that kind of used the German language, flying their Flügelrad. They called them Flügelrads, again, kind of like very reminiscent of the German language, and basically headed by a religious order. And Byrd was given a briefing by a master, by this master from the Ariani, telling Byrd about the dangers posed by atomic weapons, and that the surface of humanity was not ready for such destructive weapons, and it needed to be very careful, and so on and so on. I think many people probably know of the story of Admiral Byrd's journey into the center of the Earth. But the thing is that I think that really did happen. That Byrd's plane did go missing. Byrd, after Operation Hay Jump, did give at least one interview where he talked about this land beyond the poles, a vast land, with flowing rivers and greenery and so forth, that was beyond the poles. So, he's not talking about the South Pole, because that's covered by a vast ice sheet. Mm-hmm. And he's not talking about, the deserts, the Antarctic deserts there. He's talking about a land with flowing rivers and vegetation and so forth. And that's where you get the diary and Byrd's reminiscences of this meeting with the master of the Ariani.
And this is one of those. There is a bit of controversy around it, because I've heard so many people talking about it, but of course it's so difficult to research. How do we know that this is actually Admiral Byrd's true diary? But I mean, you're saying that it's a relative of his that had brought it out. Is that he's the one who actually found it?
Well, Harley Byrd claims to be the nephew of Admiral Byrd, but he's a mysterious figure himself. Even trying to confirm him, I've never been able to confirm his identity. People say that he's not credible. He certainly did come out and say this, and the diary is available publicly. You can download it on the internet. Mm-hmm. So all of that is out there. But actually, for Harley Byrd himself, some people say he was absolutely the real deal. There was one gentleman I met, Frank Strangers. He's the guy that had the experience, Stranger at the Pentagon, where he met Valiant Thor at the Pentagon.
Oh yeah, please continue.
So Frank Strangers, he actually he met Harley Byrd, and he got, I think, Harley Byrd to write some words for one of the editions of Stranger at the Pentagon. So he knew Harley Byrd, and he was like, he vouched for Harley Byrd. Now, Frank Strangers himself is a very interesting figure. I mean, I got to meet him, and I kind of came away from that meeting thinking that the guy was, very sincere, a wonderful person. He had a beautiful kind of vibration. You could feel it radiating from him. But there was something strange going on as well. Like he had certificates on his wall, and I kind of did due diligence and found some of the certificates to be like, fake.
Okay.
So it's like, what's going on here? But he was a reverend. He did work for law enforcement for a number of years. So, a lot of UFO researchers basically dismiss him. But I think he definitely was, playing the game. I mean, I've said that now a few times. It's like if you're going to be in this world of trying to understand what's happening in these kind of like special access programs that are unacknowledged and not even divulged to members of Congress, it's a kind of cloak and dagger world. Sure. And it's not straightforward. It's not as though I can go in there and give me the documents and I'm going to report it and tell Zak and we're going to release it all. It's like, no, it's very shadowy. You never quite know whether the person you're talking to is the real deal or not, because often they have kind of like conflicting agendas. On the one hand, they want the information to get out, but on the other hand, they're obligated to discredit themselves. To kind of like do what Frank Strangers did, which was to have these concocted certificates hanging on his wall, which anyone who looked at it, because I took photos of him and thought, wow, okay, impressive, he's got all these things. But then I looked it up and that university doesn't exist. It was weird.
Just very briefly, for anyone who doesn't know who Valiant Thor is, Valiant Thor was apparently an extraterrestrial being, and he had a couple of beautiful women with him. He came to the Pentagon. I guess he lived there for some time, and he had to prove his bona fides to the U.S. government. What can you tell us about Valiant Thor? Because this is another one. I don't know how much I can put, how much stake I can put in it. I mean, it's something that is always second or third hand. I have seen one or two photos, but it just looks like a guy in a suit.
Right. Well, Valiant Thor, the story is that he arrived in 1957 on a spacecraft from Venus, and it landed in Virginia. He was met, escorted to the Pentagon, and that's when he began to have a dialogue with the Pentagon, with President Eisenhower, wanting to reach out to the United Nations and present a message for all humanity, kind of like what we saw in the Day the Earth Stood Still. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. So what happened was that Frank Strangers said that he was he was showing photos of Valiant Thor that actually what happened of a famous American contactee, Howard Menger. I think that was in 1958. It was the High Bridge home, New Jersey, of Howard Menger. Some photos were taken of Valiant Thor and his two companions, and the photos circulated around, and people were told that these are three extraterrestrials from Venus. So Frank Stranger's got his hands on these photos, and he starts showing them at lectures, because he was also really into UFOs, and he starts showing them at lectures, and then he gets approached by a female agent. I can't remember if she was an FBI agent or worked at the Pentagon, but he gets approached by this agent, and she says, "Do you want to meet this man?" And Frank Stranger says, "Sure, I'll meet him." So she arranges for him to be taken to the Pentagon, walk through the security gates, and into the heart of the Pentagon, and eventually meets with Valiant Thor, and so Frank Strangers had the meeting, and that's when his experiences with Valiant Thor began, and it really had a profound effect on his life, and he wrote a book about it, and also basically started up a very popular newsletter writing about his continued meetings, encounters with Valiant Thor and the other Venusians, and so that's how that all began. But the thing to keep in mind was that Frank Strangers was a pastor, and he did work for law enforcement, so he was a very credible person. But then he gets kind of thrown into this murky world of extraterrestrials and contact, and so I think he had to play the game and and do things to discredit himself. But I think ultimately he was telling the truth, that he really did have these encounters.
Okay, all right. Well, we've just got 10 minutes left before we open the phones in the second half of the show. But I want to know, Dr. Salla, do you know why at the end of Barack Obama's administration there were so many people that went down to Antarctica, including Buzz Aldrin, who almost died?
Yeah, I think it was pretty simple. They had to explain to the leaders of the transnational corporation down there, who worked closely with the Germans on Mars, why their candidate didn't win. Why their candidate wasn't going to win. They had to explain themselves because, I think they were basically convinced that, that the election was, was a done deal. Hillary Clinton was going to win. Everything had been arranged. The right people had been bribed. The right double agents had been put in place. So they didn't expect Trump was going to win. But then just a week or so before the election, it was pretty clear from internal polling that Trump was going to win in a landslide. Mm-hmm. So Kerry had to go down there and basically apologize to the Germans and the transnational elite down there and say, sorry, our candidate didn't get in. We can't go ahead with our agenda. The new administration, but we got our insurance policy, and we're gonna do everything we can to take him down.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, do you think now that President Trump has been in office, do you think he is aware of what's going down there? And second part of that question, do you think that Space Force is going to be our open door to finally getting disclosure about all of this technology?
Well, that's really interesting, Zach. One of the first things that happened in January 2017 was that Trump said he's sent his emissary down to Antarctica, and that was Newt Gingrich and his wife, Callista. Mm-hmm. Now, we all know who Newt Gingrich is, but many people don't know that Newt Gingrich's wife, Callista, was appointed by Trump to be the U.S. ambassador to the Vatican.
Ah, I did not know.
So they went down there to Antarctica, and the purpose was to basically say Trump's in power, but he's not a bad guy. He wants to make a deal. Let's make a deal. And so I think that's when you actually had these efforts by the Trump administration to reach out to the Germans and the transnational corporation down there in Antarctica to come up with a deal. And so I think that's what happened. Apparently, there were these efforts to come up with a deal. I don't think anything was finalized. And the deep state is not necessarily the same thing as the German space program and the transnational. We're talking about different power blocks.
There's a lot of competing interests here.
Exactly. The German nationalists, they have their own agenda. They don't necessarily work closely with this kind of the global network of families, 13 ruling families, 13 ruling bloodlines and so forth. We all know about that. So there are different agendas down there. So I think there have been these kind of negotiations that have been going on. Now, according to some of the early reports, the Trump administration did reach an agreement with the Germans down in Antarctica to basically reveal the existence of the Germans, that they weren't Nazis, that these were German nationalists that escaped the war, escaped Hitler and set up a colony in Antarctica, and they have all these advanced technologies and so forth and so forth. Kind of put that spin on it.
Sure.
But the deep state did not want that to go forward, because the deep state doesn't want disclosure to happen, because I think the bottom line is that people running the deep state, they are high-level Satanists, mm-hmm. Black magicians, if you like, sorcerers, if you like. These people understand the power of consciousness. They also understand how consciousness and technology are symbiotic. In other words, if you keep our technology at a very primitive level, like reliant on fossil fuels and kind of like very limited energy supplies like that, human consciousness is going to reflect that. So humanity is going to be easier to manipulate. But if you release advanced technologies like free energy, that's going to have effect on human consciousness. The collective consciousness will shift as well, and that'll make humanity much more difficult for the deep state to control. That's why they don't want disclosure to happen. They don't want these advanced technologies to be released, because they understand very well that these advanced technologies, free energy, wormholes, kind of like holographic healing technologies, being able to replace limbs, heal any illness, cancer, and so forth. The release of those technologies will have an incredible impact on the collective human consciousness. Basically, take us into a golden age.
Sky's the limit. Okay, let me do a couple of quick, couple more quick thank yous, and then I have one last question I've got to get in before we open up the phone for calls. Latia says, we hear a rooster. Yes, there's a rooster in the background. Do you have a couple of them on the property?
Yeah, we live on a nice 4-acre property here on the Big Island, and we got some feral roosters and
beautiful,
and turkeys and some pigs occasionally. So yeah, it's quite a little farm out there.
That's so cool. KC Anon says catastrophic plate tectonics during the flood rapidly layered all the strata, which models exactly what we see today in geology. Polystrate fossils, primarily trees, invalidated the long Earth theory. Okay. Susan Rioch says, so thankful for URP, watch you every day. Thank you very much, Susan. Janine Busalt says, my chat isn't moving, hasn't in over 10 minutes. Anyone else? You guys, this is one of those things they're doing to try to, get you to stop watching the show, basically. You have to refresh your browser. I might even clear the cache if I were you. KC Anon says, so the Earth is about 6,500 years old. This can also be further supported via the Human Genome Project. Thank you, Casey. And then Sandra Bryant Cashin has also joined as a member. Okay, now I have to admit, this is a tip from our mutual friend, John D'Souza, who was on last night. He said that I needed to ask you the true story behind the Hawaiian missile crisis. This is something that didn't happen all that long ago. There was apparently an alert that went out. Everybody in Hawaii thought there was going to be an ICBM that hit them. And then it was revealed to be some type of an accident by a bumbling security guard or something like that. What really happened in Hawaii with that missile crisis?
Okay, well, that's a really important event.
Yeah.
That happened on January 13, 2018. And to kind of like set the context for this, 6 days before that, QAnon had posted several messages saying that there was going to be a false flag. I forgot the acronym now. Nuclear strike. I forgot the actual term for that. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. So there was this reference to that, and so this was something that happened 6 days before, and then on January 13, you have everyone in Hawaii who had any kind of smartphone. They received an instant message from the alert system here saying that there was an incoming ballistic missile, take shelter. And so for approximately 30 minutes, people were in a total panic thinking that we were going to be bombed. And then
before you continue, I mean, what was that like? I mean, were people just freaking out? I mean, did they just get inside, or were people trying to get back to their homes?
It was across the spectrum.
Okay.
Some people were freaking out. Some people were going to the sewers and basically, to the gutters, to the storm pipes, and putting their children in these storm pipes, thinking that's how they were going to escape a nuclear strike, because that's what was thought. Now, of course, then you have the authorities then releasing a message saying, no, it was a false alarm. It was just some guy who pressed the wrong button and the emergency alert system there, and go back to sleep. Well, what happened was then reports began to emerge of people seeing something get shot out of the sky in near Maui.
Mm-hmm.
There were reports by people on several boats seeing an object being shot down. And then you had a number of whistleblowers or insiders basically saying that the information they got was that there had been a staged ballistic missile attack where a submarine that was part of a rogue CIA operation launched a ballistic missile at Hawaii to basically, as a part of a false flag attack, to get the United States to accuse North Korea of staging an attack against the United States and then retaliating against North Korea, which would then have sucked in China and then precipitated a third world war. So that was apparently the plan, that this was a deep state false flag attack. But what happened was that the space program that has a total surveillance net over the planet, they had defected. They had defected a year earlier from the deep state, which is why Hurricane Irma hit Florida and made a beeline for MacDill Air Force Base, which is home of Special Operations Command. Because Special Operations Command was basically where you had all of these flying saucer, all of these anti-gravity vehicles being sent off to do all of these different missions. And they basically began to reveal these craft, and people were taking photos of the craft. I got some of those photos and released them on my website. So then basically the Air Force guys had defected from the deep state. They had aligned themselves with the Trump administration, and there's a kind of a deep story. I can go more into that if you like. But the bottom line is that the Air Force has a total surveillance grid over the Earth, especially over Hawaii. And so they could see this missile coming in from North Korea, and they shot it down. I mean, they have sophisticated satellite tracking systems and weapon systems up there. They have these flying rectangles that have directed energy weapons up there, and they just shot it down. And that's what people saw being shot down over the island of Maui, and near the island of Maui. And then for the next week, boat captains said that the Coast Guard was basically scouring the area offshore Maui looking for something. So they're looking for remnants of this ballistic missile. Wow. Yeah, it was a false flag attack that was shot down. Otherwise, it could well have started the Third World War.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it just goes to show how important it was that we got peace on the Korean Peninsula. Obviously, not much longer after that, President Trump was able to attain it. And then, I'm also immediately reminded of the missile that was shot off when they tried to shoot Air Force One out of the sky. The same group of people, same type of MO. Wow, fascinating stuff. I absolutely love it. Callie Cogwin, thank you very much for that. We do have a couple people on the phone, so I believe I saw Group C first, but actually it looks just like Sweta is on the line first. I don't know what happened to Group C, so we'll wait for her to come on in. You guys, I just want to let you know I put the link for the Zoom and then also the password and the meeting ID in the description of the video. If you just refresh your screen, then that will show up. I'm going to go ahead and drop the information into the chat again. There is the Zoom link as well as the meeting ID and the password. Sweta, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Phil.
Good evening. Good evening. What's your question for Dr. Salla? Sweta?
I do find it interesting that John Kerry also visited, Antarctica just during the election time. I'm not fully convinced they probably knew that they were going to lose the election. That's why they went there. Maybe they went to explain what their progress was in regards to how the election is going to go, or by what sort of a margin they may win, or something like that. Did the administration know that they were going to lose for sure?
Well, I mean, Dr. Salla, she obviously there could be a couple different reasons why they might have gone down there. I think we should say that this is, as far as you've been told. I mean, where did you get the information that this is the reason that that they went down there? Was it people who were associated with these world leaders, or how did you come across the info?
Okay, well, that was kind of like my analysis.
Okay.
Of why John Kerry went down there, like just a few days before the election,
Mm-hmm.
And it was and previous to the election, there had been internal polling that had been kind of leaked, showing that Trump was going to win on a landslide. And I think when you look at who Hillary Clinton worked with, it was, I think, clear that there was an expectation that she was supposed to win the election.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite a surprise. And I think Kerry had to go down there to basically answer for the deep state kind of like messing up. Because I think the thing is, we've got to look at this as it's not monolithic. You've got to look at the deep state being one kind of factor or one kind of faction, making all these kinds of promises, saying, yeah, we're in control, our person's going to get in, that's a done deal, and we're going to do A, B, C, and D when we get it in. And based on that, we want you to do E, F, G, and H. So, if that kind of thing went on, I think that would make sense for why John Kerry had to go down there and basically answer for how the deep state, wasn't able to get their candidate in.
Oh, well, I mean, as a possibility, it makes a lot of sense to me, especially if we're talking about, a kind of nebulous multinational criminal organization, which really doesn't have any specific national affiliation. Antarctica as a base of operations would be, an easy pick for places to go because it's relatively secluded. You have to have the very specific reason to go there. And then also, you had so many people. I mean, you had celebrities, you had world leaders, former astronauts. There was virtually no traffic to Antarctica outside of research scientists. And then all of a sudden, right around the time of the election, when, they never thought she'd lose and she was clearly about to, all of these people show up in Antarctica with no specific reason. They just need to go down there. We're just going to go check it out. And then you have the scary incident that took place with Buzz Aldrin. He apparently almost died of a heart attack or something like that when he was down there. And then, it just makes sense to me. Sweeta, what other reasons do you think could have been?
There was a cryptic tweet as well by Buzz Aldrin that he'd seen, the face of evil or something in Antarctica. So that was odd as well.
Yes, and actually, Dr. Salla, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, can you authenticate that? Because from what I've heard is that possibly might have been a hoax, that someone might have created a fake Twitter and then just screen captured it. Was that an actual tweet from Buzz Aldrin?
Right. Well, actually, I was at the time I was with someone who actually phoned Buzz Aldrin to find out how he was and whether that was a genuine tweet. And he said, no, it wasn't.
Okay. All right.
But he was down in Antarctica and he did suffer an illness and did have to be kind of like flown out pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So that does kind of like raise the possibility that something did happen, something was seen down there. And, disinformation is sometimes, often the best disinformation is based on, say, 95% truth.
Yeah.
But you sprinkle in enough layers or embellishments to kind of discredit the whole thing. Now, what I do know about Antarctica is that it is described as the resting place for the METHYLENE, mm-hmm. or the fallen angels. In the book of Enoch, mm-hmm. It's described that after the fallen angels had lost the war, which the book of Enoch basically describes a space war. Mm-hmm. Now, we interpret it in religious terms as like this war between angels and different angelic orders and so forth. But actually, I think they were talking about a space battle, a space war that happened between a galactic confederation, and say something that we would involve, say, reptilian extraterrestrials, different factions fighting against each other. But what the Book of Enoch does describe is that the fallen angels were taken south to a land of eternal sunshine, and placed in a massive mountain, deep underneath a massive mountain, in a prison. While later on, it emerges that these fallen angels represented a faction of extraterrestrials who had lost the war and had been placed in stasis chambers deep under some of the mountains down there in Antarctica. And the mountain range that is mentioned is the Sentinel Mountains. And these fallen angels are often called the Watchers. So, what are the chances of that? The Watchers being buried in the Sentinel Mountains.
Yeah, that's fascinating. All right, Sweta, thank you for your call.
There's one thing, another thing, Repil, do consider interviewing Eric Karlstrom and Barry Trower. Now, Barry Trower is, he is a microwave expert who was from ex-British naval intelligence.
Absolutely.
So if you could get in touch with Barry Trower and Brian Coffrin. Now, Brian Coffrin is a whistleblower from SIS Security Seattle, which is doing, which is involved with back projects with Amazon.
Okay.
On targeted individuals and organized community surveillance and psychological warfare and whatnot.
Absolutely.
If through the community spying network, which is already in place, if you could even find out in place if he's even alive, because last time he mentioned that him being a whistleblower from within the SIS security, he's his life is in danger and everything, and he stopped posting stuff on Twitter a few years ago.
Okay.
So if you could just even locate if Brian Coffrin from SIS Security Seattle, if he's if the man is still alive and well, and if you could if the existing community spying networks that are already in place, and if you could interview him,
I will continue.
And the spy camera surveillance that I've been going through for the past 10 years or so. It's like, for the last 8 years, it's like I've been in, it's like a Ukraine gate that's been happening, wherein selective leaks keep happening and selective footage gets leaked and gets highlighted. But then, unlike Ukraine gate, wherein at least Fox News had, could cover, Matt Gaetz and get their version of the story. No one actually, if I've tried going to the Indian press, people who my haters and my stalkers, they start putting allegations on them that they're favoring me.
Yes, I'll continue to look into it, sweet. I appreciate your call.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. I need to say thank you to Casey Anani. He says, interesting side note, I designed the remote launch operations base at the Pacific Missile Range facility on Pkwy. Very interesting. And then Denise says, I missed the first hour. Can you start again? No notification. Denise, I'm glad that you made it here, but unfortunately we won't be able to do that. All right, let's see here. We've got, Group C. Group C was on the line and got disconnected earlier, so we will bring Group C in. Clearly Antarctica is a fascinating place. There's so much going on down there. Back to my question about the secret space program and, possible disclosure with the Space Force. Do you think that the Space Force and the creation of the Space Force is going to result in official disclosure for humanity and for mankind? Or do you think that, this is just a step along the way?
Yeah, I think Space Force is a step along the way. I don't think it's going to be a massive disclosure. I think what's going to happen is that at some point, Space Force is going to start releasing some of these advanced technologies that use electromagnetic propulsion systems and anti-gravitic principles to be able to travel into space. And they're not going to be too forthcoming in terms of what technology drives that, but they're just going to release that and kind of like, and that'll set off a kind of like a brand new scientific kind of like quest to master the propulsion effect of electromagnetics and to kind of look at principles of anti-gravitics, which has always been there. I mean, it's been there since the 1950s. But the thing was that it was discredited and basically dismissed as a non-viable field of research. But that was because it was absorbed into the black world. But once Space Force comes out and says, okay, we have these craft that utilize these principles, then you're going to have, Boeing and General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin and Airbus and all of these major aerospace companies basically doing the kind of construction of new generations of electromagnetically propelled craft that would turn us into basically enable us to go into space.
Mm-hmm.
So people would be able to go for a kind of like a space cruise around the moon and so forth.
Well, I thought it was pretty fascinating that at the time the Space Force was announced, I can't remember if it was either right before or right after, I covered it here, but the Navy released those patents, which were essentially the TR-3B with the electrogravitic propulsion engine, talking about it, being able to create the slipstream through space-time and go from point A to point B in seconds, virtually at light speed. Group C, you're on the air with us. Can I get you to unmute?
Can.
What's up, Group C? How are you?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm well. What's your question for Dr. Salla?
So, Dr. Sal, I would like to know what your take on those pyramids in Antarctica are. And if you can, please tell me what you think about when Q posts about patriots worldwide, and then he shows a picture of a guy holding a "Where we go when we go all" sign at the South Pole in Antarctica. If that has any meaning to it.
Sure. As far as the guy showing the "Where we go when we go all" in Antarctica, showing that sign there, that I think was really Q just showing just how this has become a worldwide movement, and it has. I mean, QAnon has become worldwide, and Antarctica is a place where there's a lot of secret things going on, and I think just Q wanted us to know that there are supporters down there revealing some of the stuff. So, and the first part of the question I forgot. I have to repeat that.
Go ahead, Group C. What was the first part?
First part of the question was regarding the pyramids in Antarctica.
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting. Well, as far as the pyramids are concerned, the Atlantean technologies or the Atlantean cities or whatever remains from that is buried under a lot of ice. So if we're looking at West Antarctica, which is where I think you will find the ruins, especially up in the Palmer Peninsula, and Queen Maud Land as well, that's where you're going to find it, but it's going to be under a lot of ice. So it's going to take a lot of ice melting for what the Atlanteans built being revealed. Now, the Atlanteans, they've had a colony in Egypt, and so pyramids were a big part of the culture of Egyptian civilization, and a big part of the Atlantean civilization. And I think the structure or the nature of pyramids had several purposes. I think it had one purpose was to kind of like do something in terms of stabilizing the energy grid of the planet, but also it had something to do with kind of transmitting energy, standing waves across the planet, so you could actually have ships being repowered from these standing waves that were being created by these pyramids that had kind of like crystals, in their construction. And so as the pyramids moved, they would generate an electric field that would then be used to generate this electric standing wave around the planet for refueling things. Now, whether what people are seeing in the Google Maps photos are of these pyramids, I'm a bit skeptical of that, just because these things are going to be under the ice, and what we are seeing is kind of like on the surface, and if it's not right on the coast, if it's like in the interior of Antarctica, that would be too big. So I'm skeptical of them actually being pyramids as opposed to just being natural formations. But I could be wrong. I haven't done that much research on those particular pyramids just because I'm skeptical that they could be the real deal.
Interesting. Well, I just want to end it off with one thing, funny thing actually. So, I started ever since I started doing meditation, I've experienced lucid dreaming, so controlled dreaming, and it's quite the experience. Now, that makes me think maybe one day I can master astral projection and see for myself what's in Antarctica.
Sweet.
All
Go
right,
for it.
I'll end it here. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Group C. Keep us informed, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye-bye. All right, Dr. Salla. Now, that first super chat we got was from my buddy Looney Tune, and he asked about an alien face in Antarctica on Google Maps. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of that being reported. I pulled up the exact latitude and longitude, and it looks to me that it's just completely covered in snow. Have you ever heard of anybody reporting something like that being found down there?
I haven't heard of an alien face in Antarctica, but again, I would say that the ruins of the civilizations are buried under a lot of ice,
Okay.
and that ice, especially in West Antarctica, is approximately 11,600 years old.
Yeah.
And the ice sheets are still very thick. I mean, the last Antarctic summer, they had heat waves down there, record temperatures. And a lot of ice melted, but it would take a lot of melting to start revealing what's under there. But I think I think the process has begun, and in the years ahead, we're going to see more and more of what's under the ice there.
All right, and let's see. Mary Amezkwa says, I heard there's a freshwater lake under the ice and some pretty strange wildlife there. Is this true?
There are a number of freshwater lakes under the ice sheets of Antarctica. In fact, there's an entire water system down there. And that's how the Germans were able to originally establish their bases down in Antarctica. They used their submarines to find these waterways that are under the ice sheet. Because as you know, ice begins to form on the surface of water, and then you have the ice, the snow falling, and it builds up an ice sheet. But you still have the water flowing under the ice sheets. And so the Germans were able to find these ancient riverbeds flowing out into the ocean, and they were able to go up these riverbeds under the ice sheets, and that's how they were able to find the giant caverns where they then began to build their bases.
Okay. What do you know about Lake Vostok? Because some years ago, there was a lot of information in the news about the Russians, and they were drilling the deepest hole in the world down to the freshwater in Lake Vostok. And then all of a sudden, it seemed that they got there, and then they just stopped talking about it, and everyone forgot that it existed.
Right. Well, I think it was 1992 when Lake Vostok was 1992 Lake Vostok. They had found Lake Vostok sometime before, but in 1992 they found a huge magnetic anomaly at one end of Lake Vostok, and that was something that they were very interested in. They were wanting to drill a hole down to that to Lake Vostok to begin to excavate it, and it was okay. NASA was very much in support of them drilling this hole down to Lake Vostok and finding out what was down there until they discovered this large magnetic anomaly. And then when they found the magnetic anomaly, NASA changed its tune and said, no, drilling down there 3 miles down, will ruin the pristine ecosystem, and we don't want to pollute it. So it's not going to happen for at least another 10 years. So that's what happened. And it was in 2002 that you actually had reports of the Russians making the breakthroughs, drilling down there and starting to explore. You had reports of a team of videographers who were sent down there to videotape what was being excavated, them going missing. Apparently, the rumor was that they had recorded an ancient city down there in Lake Vostok. So I think that and some of the insiders say that that's what had happened. That in 2002, a decision was made to open up Antarctica to mainstream archaeologists and to allow them to go down there and to start recording the ancient artifacts that are down under the ice sheets. But we're talking about 2 miles, 3 miles under the ice sheets. So this apparently, dates from 2002 when a decision was made, and that apparently we are kind of in the process of a decision eventually being made to reveal to the world that, hey, we found ancient ruins under the Antarctic ice sheets, and they have kind of like really amazing technologies down there.
I remember specifically the story about the videographer team that went missing, that there was some horrific find, but also it was reported that one of the reasons they did not want people to break through the ice is because due to the unique and ancient ecosystem that was, no doubtedly existing under the ice, that perhaps there could be microbes which would be dangerous and deadly to humans because we've never come into contact with them. Obviously, that hasn't happened. So, all right. Also, Right on Cue says, bring on Atlantis. Thank you so much. And Chris Hawkins says, 1.7 thousand likes, 3.7 thousand viewers. Let's take it to YouTube, serve it up to them nice and hot. You guys, please, if we can get everybody here to leave a like, I would so appreciate it. And then after we're done, please go and leave a comment on the video as well. That will let them know that this is programming worth serving up. All right, we've got Katie Osmond coming into the room right now, and Katie is getting her microphone ready. Pardon me. Dr. Salla, you had, I know that you typically are on the lecture circuit. You're doing conferences and stuff like that. Do you have anything coming up in the near future that you want people in the audience to know about?
Oh, well, that's really interesting because right now, this weekend, I would have been at Contact in the Desert.
Yep.
So there have been a number of conferences that I've unfortunately have either been cancelled or I've had to pull out of. So it doesn't look like there's going to be any live events. So what I've decided to do is to start organising webinars. So I will be doing my first official webinar probably on June 13. And so I'll put announcements on my website, but that's probably the best way for now until these live events start coming back again, that I'll be doing live webinars and people will be able to kind of like dive deep into my current research.
All right. And they can find about those at exopolitics.org, or will there be another place?
That's the place to go, just exopolitics.org.
Okay, great. And again, everyone, if you want to get to Dr. Salla's Twitter profile or to the website, the links for both of those are in the description below. Katie, you're on the air. Can we get your question for Dr. Salla?
Absolutely. Redfield 78, how are you tonight?
I'm excellent, dear. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you. Before I make myself sound stupid, did you guys touch on Little America, which is next to Antarctica?
Not specifically, but we did touch on the fact that America has a presence down in Antarctica. Dr. Salla, is Little America just the name of the base that we have down there, or is it a specific region?
That was Little America. That was the original base that Admiral Byrd had set up down there, and over the years it was expanded out to the current base just down there by Ross Shelft.
Okay.
Okay, and then just two quick things. Really, I swear, quick. KC. Yes, 666 is a prime number in the Bible. 333-555-666-888 and 999. And Anthony Sullivan, a viewer, would like to know, what was Tom Hanks doing in Antarctica? And that's it.
Okay, well, thank you, Katie. Now, was Tom Hanks one of those people that went down to Antarctica?
Yes.
Wow.
know why.
Yeah, well, Dr. Salla, you know, I mean, if Tom Hanks was one of the many famous people that went down there, personally, my guess is that it points to his role among the deep state and the cabal in the same way that it would point to, you know, Buzz Aldrin or John Kerry going down there. And if you've been following anything in the alternative press over the last couple of years, I'm sure you've heard Mr. Hanks's name pop up on a number of occasions. What is your response to that?
Well, you know, I think unlike John Kerry, because John Kerry was Secretary of State and he had a very powerful political position in the United States, and I think he went down there. There was a political mission, but for some of these others, you know, I mean, there was the Russian Patriarch Kirill, you know, Buzz Aldrin, of course.
Oh, the Pope too, right?
The Pope, no, not the Pope. I think there it was the Russian Patriarch that went down there.
Okay,
Kirill.
Okay.
And there were a few other kind of like high-profile people that went down there. And the story I heard was that they were being shown the ruins of Atlantis under the ice. They were being shown this because they were being kind of prepped for what's to come, that there was eventually going to be an announcement about this ancient civilization found down there. And of course, you know, the big question people are going to have is, well, how could this be? If Antarctica's been under the South Pole all this time, how could you have a civilization down there? So I think, you know, that's when people are going to start to be kind of introduced or even red-pilled into the idea of pole shifts, which is a pretty scary thing.
It certainly is.
If you think that these geophysical pole shifts that Charles Hapgood talked about in the 1950s and Albert Einstein endorsed, that they really have happened, and that's what destroyed Atlantis, you know, 11,600 years ago, and we're due for another pole shift now. Overdue.
All right, Katie, thanks again for your call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you take care. Thank you.
You too. Talk to you soon. Okay. All right. Now, let's see. Janine Busald again says, chat totally disappeared now. Try what they may. I'm here to stay. Don't need it to enjoy the video. Chat won't allow use of the U.S. flag emoji. Yeah, go USA. That is terrible. Many people have told me that. And that's the reason I have the chat on the screen here for you guys at home who can't get it to show up. That's a real bummer because I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to participate in the conversation. All right, so Diane Rain is coming up next. We're going to have Diane here on the phone. I also want to say thank you to Kendra Marie for joining as a member of the channel. Kendra, I appreciate you. Let's see. So, Dr. Salla, is there anything about Antarctica that we haven't touched on yet that you want to make sure that we get into the program tonight? I just want you to think about it and then have it ready because we're going to have Diane here on the phone any second, and I'm just waiting for her microphone to kick in, and actually it may not be kicking in. We're going to go ahead. Oh, here she is. She is here. Diane, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome back to the program.
Thank you. I have a quick question. It's hard. Don't look at the live stream. Because of the voices, it was funny. But anyway, regarding Dr. Frank Strange's, he asked Valiant Thor about, he wanted to know the Dead Sea Scrolls, and information was revealed to him where Jesus says, "My Father has many mansions." Valiant Thor said he actually meant the translation would be he had many planets, and that angels are actually higher dimensional beings. What does Dr. Salla think about that?
Yeah, please.
I would agree with that. I think that a lot of what we find in the Bible is actually references to beings that are using advanced technologies, which to kind of primitive peoples would have appeared to be kind of magic or godlike. And so I think it's quite natural that they would use these terms like flying chariots to describe these spacecraft that the gods were using, or the extraterrestrials were using to land on the planet, and they would describe the leaders of these of these extraterrestrial groups in these kind of like terms of high angels, ruling angels, seraphim, archangels, and so forth. So I think when we look at the Bible, I don't think you have myths that are just devoid of any kind of historical accuracy. I think you actually have a fairly accurate historical record of real events that happened, but presented in the language of people that were technologically illiterate from our present day and age. And so, yeah, they would describe a rocket descending from the sky and landing at a tower or a landing pad, say at a place like Baalbek, as like, you know, these fiery chariots kind of landing, and they would describe extraterrestrials who physically are very different, much taller, as gods. So yeah, I think you know, the historic Bible and other historic texts are describing these events.
You know, Diane, you know, this is an excellent point, because for some people, the idea of extraterrestrials is incongruent with their faith as Christians, or, you know, even other religions. But and I'm not saying where I fall one way or the other, but I just think all this stuff is fascinating to speak about with other people. And if you think about it, you know, what is an angel but an extra-dimensional being? I mean, heaven is a realm that exists outside of our physical plane here, and they are just beings that are coming from another place. So, you know, for me, I mean, I can see how it might fit together.
Great. Thank you so much. I don't want to take up too much time.
Diane, thank you so much for calling. I appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you.
Yep, have a great night.
Thank you, Dr. Salla. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. And then Tanette Booth says, "Hi, Miss Janine Bussault. Good to see you." And she sent you a DM. Okay. Galaxy A20 is going to be coming in now. And I just want to tell everyone that I'm going to enter the Zoom link again, as well as the meeting ID and the password. So if you guys want to get in on the conversation, Galaxy A20 is coming. Oh, honey, if you can see me, would you bring me the masks and the shirts that I got from 8kun today? I wanted to show them off on the air. Let's see. I had the owner of 8kun, that's the website with the board where Q, our favorite anon, posts, and I bought some t-shirts to support them. And then I also ordered some cheeky face masks. Not that I'm going to wear them, but one of them says censored. One of them says COVID 1984. And then the only other one says plandemic. I just wanted to show them off because I thought they were pretty funny. Galaxy A20. Can we get your name for the audience? Just need you to unmute. All right, there we go. You should be unmuted now. How are you?
How you doing, guys? How's everything?
Good. What's your name?
Eric from New York City, my friends.
Awesome, man. Glad to have you here. What's your question for Dr. Salla?
Nothing. We just want to know how the hell this is gonna stop. I mean, which way this is gonna end. I mean, New York City is very, very, very crazy right now, as the rest of the country. We just want to know what's going on.
What? Tell us what you're seeing there in New York City, because I have seen only a very little bit of reporting coming out of there. Are there people rioting there? Are they demonstrating peacefully?
Well, today we had a little encounter on 149th Street in the Bronx on 3rd Avenue. It was a little police encounter with a couple of protesters. Downtown Manhattan everything was normal as has been for the past 40 days. We still getting, craziness in the subways. We're still getting craziness in the stores. We're still getting craziness everywhere. People are paranoid. This is the major thing. If you don't have that, you're gonna get arrested. You're gonna get thrown out the buses. You're gonna get thrown out the subways. You're not gonna be served anywhere in New York City. Comrade de Blasio has done a trick on us over here in New York City, and man, as us and Q and everybody else, we are very, very upset what's going on right now.
Oh, well, I mean, as you should be. Eric, tell me, are there many people in New York who are hip to the coordinated effort of what's taking place? I mean, from what we see on the news, you would imagine that, essentially every resident of New York City believes that Donald Trump is the worst person that ever lived, and that Comrade de Blasio is a saint on a platinum chariot himself. So what is the general mood like there in New York?
Well, there's a lot of us that we're not blue. This is the problem in the blue states. New York City is, I think, the major bluest of all. When all the crap gets crazy, this is what it ends. To answer your question, this is easy, my friend. We need to do something radical. Something's got to happen. New York City, as of me, if you go to Facebook right now, we have a big movement of patriots in New York City. We're counting with more than 10,000 members. We're hosting a couple of websites. As me hosting a couple of them, I'm live on Facebook under Eric's Files. You're going to see how big we are here in New York City and how we are trying to get Trump again elected. And we believe in him. We believe that he's doing a great job, and we're going to get him back in here. I mean, this is the solution that we have for America. This is the best president we had. I'm a veteran. I served under Ronald Reagan, proud U.S. Navy veteran. And I'll tell you what, man, if I have to do it all again for Trump, I'm down. I'll do it.
Absolutely.
Like me, a lot of people like me feels the same way.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, Dr. Salla, what do you think about the situation that's happening right now in America? I mean, it seems like the deep state, they did everything they could to scare people into staying indoors. Clearly, this has been about the election from day one. They wanted to institute mail-in voting. It got to the point where basically the country was starting to open up, and now all of a sudden we have riots, we have looting, we have burning buildings, and now people are afraid to go out again. Do you think that this is going to continue on for very long, or do you think that something else might happen to bring it to an end?
Well, I think that what will bring it to an end is the 2020 elections. I think Donald Trump's going to win. I think he'll win in a landslide, and that'll be the end of the deep state's hopes to be able to overturn him. And I think it'll be the collapse of the deep state agenda, and because a lot of their people are being exposed, and a lot of the kind of like schemes that they had set up are going to be kind of like exposed, and you're going to have justice being done. Then I think that's when we're going to have America kind of like coming out of the madness that it's in at the moment and going towards something that's going to be much more satisfying to people, because we do have incredible potential. Once these advanced technologies and once the ancient history is kind of revealed, life on the planet can be transformed. But right now, you have the deep state playing all its major cards. The media and false flag events, using corrupt judges to be able to kind of like stymie what Trump is doing and stymie this kind of awakening that we are witnessing. But it is happening. But I think the 2020 election will put an end to that. But between now and the election, I think we just got to be, stand tall, hold firm, and just grit our teeth and come through it.
All right. I agree with you. Eric, I want you to stay safe there in New York. Tell people again how they can find you so they can connect with you on Facebook if they want to get together and find some other patriots in New York.
Cool. We are at Eric's Files at Facebook, and you can go to qsfile.wordpress.com.
All right.
We're live as we speak right now, and we are live. You guys are being streamed right now through my website.
All right. Awesome, dude. I appreciate that. And thank you very much for calling in. Stay safe, okay?
My pleasure, my friend.
All right,
Stay
brother.
safe.
Thanks for your service. We'll talk to you soon.
Aye, sir.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Let's see. God's Daughter, thank you for that. Mark Estes says, a shout out from Portland, Oregon, where we go one, we go all. Thanks for your great channel. Thank you for watching, Mark. I appreciate it. God's Daughter says, for the love of Muffingate, buy them snacks. I certainly will. So Dr. Salla, a couple weeks ago, my dogs got into a fight under my desk here. They while I was live on the air, they got into a vicious fight, and I had to separate them. And my guest didn't miss a beat. He just kept telling his story. It was wonderful. And ever since then, Muffingate, Muffin is my dog. She's the one who started the fight. That's been trending on YouTube and Google. If you go to type in my channel name, then Muffingate pops up. It's kind of funny. So we've got Bruce Banner on the line. Bruce, are you there? Bruce, I can't hear you. Are you there? Maybe Bruce has a problem with his mic. We're going to go to the next caller and just see if Bruce can get that mic issue figured out. Caller on the phone ending 4530. Can I get your name?
Hello?
Yes, you're here. Can we get your name?
Yes, my name is Alex.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for calling in. What's your question for Dr. Salla?
Oh, I just wanted to call in to because I was listening about the previous caller who was from the Bronx, and I just wanted to let you guys know there's a bunch of us in New York City. I mean, we can't make a lot of noise because people will beat us up. I got fired from a job for voting for Trump. But
oh, gosh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I got over it. I got another job, but I learned never to say the word Trump, you know. But I'm just hoping like somebody watches our election this time, because last election, I'm sure Trump got more votes than 3,000 in Manhattan. I just think it's rigged here. I've thought that for 40 years.
I would have to agree with you. And I think that with 2018, the midterms, they kind of use that as a test platform just to see how the powers that be were going to cheat and in what ways. And I do believe, and Q has told us on the board, that in 2020 here, they're not going to be able to cheat. You know, we've already had a lot of cleaning up done on the voter rolls. I believe that there's going to be even more that's done before November actually hits. And I think that there are going to be federal election minders in place. So as long as the Dems don't get to institute, you know, mail-in voting across the board, I think that we're going to be okay. So
yeah, but you know, I still think New York something goes on.
Oh, I wouldn't imagine.
Mail-in voting.
Yeah.
Something just goes on here. Look what happened to Bernie Sanders in the primaries.
Oh yeah,
they lost 200-something thousand votes.
Yeah, they certainly did. They definitely they couldn't allow Bernie to win, because even though he's a different political spectrum from Trump, he's still somebody that I don't think that they could have controlled in the same way that they could control Joe Biden.
No, but I mean, it just shows there's some kind of like fraud machine going on here. You know,
yes.
For New York City to lose out of Brooklyn that many votes, that's a lot of votes. That's 250,000 votes.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, what I'm going to be looking for in November is for them to be reporting on people being caught losing votes and trying to stuff the ballot box. So
Gosh, I hope so. I hope there's just some way. Well, anyways, my prayers are with all of you, all the patriots, all the Trump supporters, and
my same to you.
Just got to stay strong. A few more months to go. I mean, they really are throwing everything out there. It's like every day it's something.
They are. Yeah, they absolutely are. But yeah, we'll be praying for you as well, and definitely stay safe, and you know, keep calling in too. Let us know that you're okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Bye.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Now, Dr. Salla, I guess I also want to know, what's it like there in Hawaii? I mean, you know, Barack Obama was from Hawaii. You know, is it a place where it's safe to admit that you voted for Donald Trump, or that you even lean conservative?
Definitely, Hawaii is very much a blue state. I think it's one of the most kind of left-leaning states in the United States. So yeah, you definitely need to be careful about displaying your Trump support or affiliation. So, but thankfully, Hawaii is a pretty relaxed place. I mean, there is this aloha spirit, and so people don't get too wound up. You know, they're not going to be beaten up if you're a Trump supporter. Maybe someone might kind of look at you strange as though you're crazy. I mean, but you're not going to get you know, viciously attacked as might happen in places like New York or San Francisco. So
sure.
Thankfully, Hawaii does have that aloha tradition, and it definitely feels very safe here. We don't have the kind of social cleavages you have in other states. It's very much a multi-ethnic state. So yeah, it's a good place to be.
All right. Let's see. We've got a new caller on the line. Caller, can we get your name?
Yeah, do you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Yeah. What's your name?
Tony Sullivan.
Tony, thank you for your call. What's your question or comment for Dr. Salla?
So, well, my question is, seeing that we're on this Antarctica kick, I've been sitting at home doing a lot of this reptilian search when you find all these different eye flutters, you know?
Yes.
And I just want to see what people thought about that, how he feels towards that. Because you see a lot of that, and then you see the recent one with the German lady that came out hating Trump, and they did the reptilian eye thing with that. And you can find a lot of it if you're looking for it, you know?
Yeah, I definitely. Dr. Salla, this is one of those things I'm never sure if they're actually seeing someone with some strange, other, worldly eye movement, or if it's just a symptom of the fact that the flicker rate on the video or a low frame rate on the film or something like that.
Well, not only that, is it happens to all the usual suspects, like the Bush's kids. They seem to just have like, quote, hologram failure type stuff.
Sure.
And they all get that certain color, and it's always that certain pixelation, and you never see it anywhere else. You either get the eye blink where the eyes turn white, or you get the reptilian where the reptilian eyes blink, or they change that certain pixelation color.
Yeah. No, you're right.
It's always the usual suspects,
Dr. Salla, what do you think about that?
Well, that's a really kind of fascinating question. It brings me to this David Icke idea that we're being ruled by like reptilian shapeshifters, and sometimes the disguises drop, and so you get to see those kind of the vertical eye slits or the scaly skin or something like that. I think we are, as a species, we have different different extraterrestrial genetics within us, and I think it's quite possible that some of us do have a little more of the reptilian DNA, and so sometimes that can shift. Whether or not we are kind of like in a situation like John Carpenter's film They Live. I'm sure you've watched that.
Obey, consume.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I think the actor Roddy
Piper, yeah.
Yeah, he said that that movie They Live was a documentary. I thought, okay, this guy's really kind of gotten up to speed with what's out there, and so yeah, I mean.
Well, then he died shortly thereafter. I mean, he was still a young man, but he was gone not long after making that comment. I thought that was a little convenient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think there definitely is an element where a lot of technology and a lot of mind control is used to kind of stop us from seeing extraterrestrials or reptilians who have kind of infiltrated our society, or maybe even occupy high positions in office, like David Icke says. So that's definitely a possibility. But as you said, it's like knowing for 100% for sure that this person is a reptilian, because their eyes flickered and showing vertical slits on the TV screen, it's a bit risky, but definitely it's a possibility.
Right, definitely. All right, Tony, thank you for your call, buddy. I appreciate it. All right, we've got 2 more people on the line. Well, I guess 3 people now. But Dr. Salla, I wanted to ask if you had thought of anything that we needed to make sure we discussed tonight in regards to Antarctica before we take these last 3 calls. Was there anything that came to mind?
Yeah, there is. One of the things that came to mind was the 2 whistleblowers that Linda Moulton Howe interviewed, Spartan 1 and Spartan 2, and their claims that Antarctica is the major spaceport for this international secret space program involving all the major nations on the planet. But that at the NSA headquarters, they have an office there dedicated. I think she said the 7th floor, or they said the 7th floor, dedicated to interstellar trade. And I think that's important to emphasize that, because there's a lot of people out there, making, questioning whether or not this is real, whether the tech exists, whether, the cover up is happening. But I think, what we're getting from the insiders is that not only is this tech real, but that there's extensive interstellar trade going on. And the question that then comes to mind is exactly what is being traded. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe we have some technology, but we can't imagine civilizations being 1,000 years more evolved than us wanting our technology. So what is it that we would have to offer? And so that brings the question of genetics, it raises the question of a slave trade. Are we the modern day Africa, or are we the Africa of of interstellar slavery? Is this where the extraterrestrials come to get, to remove, thousands of people, millions of people over the course of a year, to filter them into this kind of galactic slave trade? And so, and is this being done with the connivance of major nation states that say, okay, well, sure, maybe we lose a few million people, but who's going to miss a few million street people suddenly disappearing? But in return, we get all this advanced technology that we can use for our space program. So, but I think that's an important issue to keep in mind, is that trade is happening. And so what is it from Earth that is probably being traded by these major transnational corporations with extraterrestrial civilizations from other solar systems?
Well, absolutely. It's a fascinating idea, and it certainly is the kind of thing that I can see the government being willing to get involved in. I mean, like this, arguably incredible advancement for mankind, versus the lives of, many people who, in their opinion, probably are not going to amount to much when you do a calculation as far as they're concerned. We do have Bruce Banner back on the line. Bruce, are you there? Bruce, hello. Bruce, can you hear me? All right.
I am.
Okay, Bruce, I just muted you. Can you go ahead and unmute your microphone again? Bruce. Well, Bruce, I'm going to need you to make sure that you unmute your microphone and make sure that the stream is muted in the background, because I'm wondering if that's why we have a delay there. I'm going to bring the next caller in. Caller, go ahead and mute your stream so that we don't get the feedback, and then I'm going to unmute you, and I'll need you to tell me your name. Caller, what's your name?
Tina.
Hi, Tina. How are you?
I'm doing great. I watch you all the time. I'm excited that I got a call in.
Well, thank you so much for calling and watching. What's your question or comment for Dr. Salla?
I'm kind of shaky right now, so I was wondering if either of you think that the next false flag before the election could be about aliens, and that to incite mass panic.
Dr. Salla, that would make good on the prediction of, was it Werner Herzog? Not Werner Herzog, that's the director.
Werner von Braun.
Werner von Braun, that's it. Yeah, that would make good on the prediction of Werner von Braun. Any insight into that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. The deep state seems to be playing its major cards at the moment. We've had the CV-19, we've had the now you're having race wars being kind of instigated in the United States. There was the Hawaiian false flag event. So the idea of an alien invasion, I mean, that's definitely a false flag. Now, there is a kind of spin on that it might not necessarily be an alien false invasion. It might be more like an alien salvation event where aliens suddenly appear with all of the kind of technological answers or solutions to,
wow.
cancer, the pandemics that are around, and that the Vatican is a part of this and would welcome them as our brothers in Christ. That the Vatican is actually on record talking about extraterrestrials as brothers in Christ. So I think that the Vatican is very much a major player in any kind of alien false flag event that might portray the aliens as kind of saviors.
The
coming
alien
here to
messiah.
save the planet.
Yeah. Caller Tina, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, is that something you could see taking place, or do you think that's too out there?
I have no clue. But I was just thinking when he mentioned the Vatican about they have one of the largest, what do they call it, telescopes in the world named Lucifer.
That's right. That's a little strange that they would have that.
I think that maybe they know, they are also in a group of people that know a lot more than we do about things.
Yeah.
But that's about all I have to say.
Well, I think you're right. That definitely is the case. And there's, more information that we've never, ever learned than information that we have forgotten as a society, I think. There's probably so much that's going on behind the scenes and we don't know about it. Tina, thanks for your call and I appreciate you.
Thank you. I love you.
You're welcome. Love you too.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. All right. Awesome. All right, so we're here at the end, you guys. I just wanted to show these masks because this came from the 8 Coon store. We got the censored mask, we have Plandemic, and then we have COVID 1984. And I know that these are backwards, but hopefully you can change that in your mind. Pretty interesting stuff. I also did get this t-shirt, which says join or 404, like join or die, but 404, the notorious internet thing that you'll get when the page doesn't work. All right, so before we leave, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Dr. Salla, for being here, and I am really looking forward to next week. There is so much additional stuff that we can talk about, and I'm really, really excited to have you back on the show. So thank you so much once again.
You're welcome, Zach. Thanks.
All right. And then just a quick reminder, you guys can go to the links in the chat, get to Dr. Salla's Twitter profile and his website, exopolitics.org. Do go there and sign up. Dr. Salla, I'm assuming that you have a newsletter that people can sign up for so that they get notification for your articles?
That's right, yes. They can just go to the website, and at the very top there's a subscribe menu feature, and you just put in your email, and that way you'll get newsletters whenever I put out a new article or have an announcement.
Okay, excellent. I want to say thank you to everybody in the audience. Thank you to the mods for keeping the chat comfy. Do appreciate you, everybody who donated. And then I don't know how many likes and people we have watching right now, but please, when you leave, consider leaving a like on your way out the door. Thank you guys so much. Don't miss us tomorrow on Comfy Sunday at 7 p.m. Methods and I are going to have LT from And We Know on the program. All right, everyone, good luck and God bless. We'll talk to you tomorrow.